said climate change. Or not, she didn't say climate change, but that's what I took as climate change.
Environmental crisis. You ever wonder if those things are the noise? Like if you weren't worried about an environmental crisis, what would you be doing? Right? I don't have no idea. You know, so it isn't like it's a matter of like we're gonna step in and do this instead of that. It isn't like we're gonna, it's just we don't know what we would do otherwise. It's almost like asking if you didn't have a phone, what would you do? It's hard for us to imagine. But would you find something to do? Yeah, of course you would. Of course you would. It just wouldn't be that. So now that kind of begs this question of whether or not that's good noise. Because we see that you guys get a constant stream of information about things, whether it's true or false. And then you also have incredibly high levels of anxiety and depression. I wonder if maybe telling you guys that the world is so screwed up, it's almost irredeemable. It's almost like I wonder if that makes you feel like the world is so screwed up and almost irredeemable. Yeah.
I think you just get used to the noise a lot. You just when you constantly just every day we know about the noise and we recognize the noise, you just get used to it. When I first got here, the sound of the when you go to the solar panels bothered me because it's like a ring every time I walk around. And then it's slowly and slowly every week it was gone.
Yeah, it just kind of fades in the back.
Yeah.
Or even the refrigerator back there. I can hear it. If you're quiet, you can hear the high-pitched one.
Oh, yeah.
And I can hear it. So all of these things going on at once. It's just constant noise. And what's interesting is that the noise isn't necessarily, I put all these words down, the noise isn't even necessarily a distraction in a conscious sense. Remember, tell me if this sounds familiar. You've got these three parts of you, your psyche. We'll look at just two of them. One part is your consciousness. The stuff of which you're conscious. That's the stuff that you're aware, that's your field of awareness. And then you've also got this part down here, it's a personal unconscious. Personal unconscious. And this is interesting because that's where all of these things that you don't notice go. What you notice goes here, what you don't notice goes down here. So just because you don't notice like the sound of the refrigerator, that doesn't mean you don't hear it. You do hear it. It does influence you. And that's the big part, is that it leads to, it influences you in some way. And so that, of course, then leads to your actions, the things that influence you. So if you're ever sitting somewhere and you find yourself perhaps, let's say, very restless, you can't figure out why, but your mind is just like really restless, you have to walk away, it very well could be that it's the sound of the refrigerator that's bugging you, or the sound of the lights, or the sound of the solar panels. Things that we aren't necessarily completely conscious of, because if you're around it long enough, you just kind of get used to it. You don't even notice it anymore. It's like, I think in first semester we talked about it, the story of the carp in the water, the old fish. He's swimming around, he comes next to some younger fish, and he asks them, how's the water? And they have no idea what he's talking about. And I think if I were to ask you, how's the air? Not the wind, not the temperature, not the weather, but ask you, how's the air? That's a hard thing for us to answer. Imagine if you could see air, of course, it would be all around us, but we don't even notice it because it's just kind of in the, we wouldn't know what it's like to not live around it. Of course, when you don't have it, now you notice it. It's kind of like if you're used to having a lot of quiet, a lot of solitude, and then you interact with a noisy world, a noisy city, that now stands out to you. It's a lack of solitude, a lack of quiet. Excuse me. Now, if you're used to a noisy area, and then suddenly you're put into a very quiet environment, now we start getting anxious. That's when I look out, like when the class is quiet, I see some of you guys doing this with your leg, kicking your leg around. You're getting anxious because it's odd, it's different. You know, and then when we start hearing noises, it kind of gets our attention. So the question is that, what is the influence that it's having? It's a distraction. Yeah. And you notice that he just kind of uses this word noise generally. He's not specific about it. But it's kind of a distraction. And so it distracts our consciousness. It does give us a level of chaos. I guess the question becomes, what's it distracting us from? And what's it distracting us to? And that kind of goes to what you were saying towards the beginning. It distracts us from things. And that's the really hard part, though, kind of. Because, I mean, what would we be doing otherwise? And that's the truth. We don't know. Would you be doing would you be writing your great novel right now? Your first great novel right now? We'll never know. We'll never know. Because we're constantly filled with noise. Now, we live in this world of constant noise which captures our... And notice he's not making it a criticism. He's just pointing this thing out. So now if you recognize that the noise does have some kind of an influence on you, now start to think about the other kinds of things that have an influence on us down here. Like we completely understand and we completely accept the idea that your early childhood traumas are going to reside here. Things that we don't know why we are the way that we are, why we think the things that we think. They happen down here. And that's when, like, for example, you'll be like, you'll have like, some anger issues. And I'll ask you, why are you so angry? I don't know, it's just the way I am. No, there is no just the way you are. There's a reason for it, and it's coming from here. If you're aware of it, then you can explain it. If you're not aware of it, then it comes from this unconscious. And that's the whole point of psychoanalysis or psychotherapy, to take the things that are in your unconscious and bring them up into the conscious. That way, you can actually determine the actions that you take. Over here, you're just kind of responding to things. You're not in complete control of your actions. Why are you so angry? I don't know, I just am. It's just the way I am. Over here, why are you so angry? Now that I know why I am, I can do something about it. I can recognize it when I'm getting to that point, and I can change. But you can't change until you bring the unconscious into the conscious. But the difficulty that so much of our world, our world and our lives are playing on this at this level right here, the unconscious level. And so now the danger comes in with what Meerloo is talking about here. Remember, he's concerned about brainwashing. He calls it menticide. Menticide is the death of a mind. And so it's not just like, oh, you can trick people. The idea is that you actually kill a person's personality and you replace it with a new one. So he gives us a series of examples in this first chapter of times when people have undergone this kind of interrogation, especially in work. You can see from his years, he was part of the Dutch resistance to the Nazis. And his job specifically was to prepare people so that when they got arrested by the Nazis, they would be prepared to resist interrogation. And it wasn't an if, it was a when they got arrested. That was his gig. And then he had to flee because he got arrested. And he was about to be arrested and he found out. So he took off, and then he came to the United States, and that's when he became an American. Oh, first he went to Britain, and then he came to the United States. And so his concern is that the way that you kill a person's mind is not just by beating them and telling them, say what we told you to say. It's harder than that. It's more nefarious than that. Because you can get a person to say what you want them to say as long as you beat them, but as soon as you stop beating them, then they're not going to say it anymore. Now they're going to feel like, they're safe. So the process that he talks about, the process that we're going to look at, is how you can actually get a person to believe a confession, to the point where they actually think that maybe they did do it, to the point that even if they get released and they get to a place of safety, they'll still think that they did it, and they'll still feel guilty for having done it. You have to kind of reprogram them again, basically kill that self, and try to reimplant the old one. And the point of that first chapter, like I said, it's titled, "You Too Would Confess." Many of us would sit there and go, nah, not me. If I didn't do it, I wouldn't confess. Like the chapter says, and he's an expert, you too would confess. Have you guys ever seen those police videos where they interrogate someone until they confess, but it's a false confession? There's a lot of those, man. There's a lot of them out there. People confess all the time for stuff that they didn't do. And there's ways that you can do that. So it's playing at this level. It's not playing on someone at this level. It's playing on them at this level. So you basically plant something that's not true down here, and then you bring it up into the consciousness. So they believe that it was in them all the time, and you just help them discover it. It's a really ugly, nefarious thing, but it's also possible. It happens all the time. That's what he's writing about here. So that's the part he's worried about. The part that captures our minds, even when we're not aware of it. Even when we're not aware of it. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticism? So, death of the mind. Happy Wednesday. Go ahead and put those away.